Hello and welcome to our podcast episode number 110, Holiday Horror Unleashed, Mischievous Monsters Wreak Havoc in Small Town. I'm Timothy and I am here with my very good friend Thomas. Tonight we're going to talk about Gremlins. We are both very excited that you, dear viewer, could join our film night.
Gremlins is a 1984 American horror comedy film directed by Joe Dante about a young man named Billy Peltzer who receives a strange creature called Gizmo as a pet, which spawns other creatures that transform into aggressive monsters, causing havoc in his town during Christmas Eve. So, Tim, did you like Gremlins?
Whoa. Thomas, I did enjoy Gremlins, but it wasn't my cup of tea per se. It was quite entertaining, especially with the humor intertwined throughout the film.
Oh, come on, Timothy. You can't tell me that you didn't enjoy the horror elements of the movie? The creatures were terrifyingly hilarious. Don't you think so?
Well, I admit that the Gremlins themselves were quite creative, but I found some parts of the film to be a bit too graphic for my taste.
Oh, come on, Tim. It's just a movie. And besides, that's what makes it so entertaining, isn't it? The suspense and thrill of not knowing what the Gremlins will do next.
I understand your point, Tom, but I still prefer movies with more of a historical or romantic touch.
Well, Timothy, you can't expect every movie to be like those old black and white classics you watch. Sometimes we need a little bit of action, humor, horror, and even a splash of romance to spice up our lives. Don't you agree?
Well, I suppose so, but I still think Gremlins leaned more towards the horror side than the comedy for me.
So, Tim, what did you think of the character development in Gremlins? I thought the relationship between Billy and Gizmo was quite touching. Don't you agree? And how about the comedic relief provided by characters like Pete and Mr. Wing? They added just the right amount of humor to balance out the horror elements.
Well, Tom, I found the character development to be satisfactory considering it was a 1980s film. However, I felt that some characters were underutilized, like Mrs. Deagle, who could have been more than just an antagonist. And while I enjoyed Pete's comedic moments, I thought his role as the idiot sidekick was a bit clipped. Though I must admit, I found Mr. Wing's character fascinating with his wise and mystical demeanor, adding an element of mystery to the story.
Well, Timothy, I understand your concerns regarding character development and cliché tropes in Gremlins, but let's not forget that it's a horror comedy film from the 80s. The main goal of this movie was to entertain us with its mix of humor and terror, which it certainly did. Now, moving on to the plot itself. I thought the storyline revolving around the rules governing Gizmo and his kind was quite creative. For instance, the rule that they cannot eat after midnight, or else they transform into these vicious monsters. This element added an interesting layer of suspense to the film as we waited for someone to make a mistake resulting in chaos ensuing. And who can forget the iconic scene where Gizmo accidentally gets wet, causing all hell to break loose? The mayhem that followed was both hilarious and terrifying, which I think is the perfect balance for a horror comedy film like Gremlins. Finally, let's not forget about the climactic battle between the townspeople and the Gremlins in the clock tower. It had all the elements of a classic monster movie showdown. Courageous heroes, determined monsters, and an explosive ending that left us on edge until the credits rolled. So, Timothy, what do you think? Did Gremlins manage to strike the right balance between horror and comedy for you? And did you find yourself rooting for the protagonists or secretly cheering on the mischievous monsters?
Well, Thomas, I must admit that despite my initial reservation, there were moments in Gremlins where the humor and horror elements did intersect well. The scene you mentioned with Gizmo accidentally getting wet was indeed a classic example of this balance. However, overall, I still found myself more drawn towards the film's historical elements rather than its horror comedy aspects. Now, let's talk about some interesting trivia about Gremlins. Did you know that the role of Mrs. Deagle was originally meant for Betty White, but she declined due to her discomfort with the darker themes of the film. However, a photo of her can still be seen on the wall behind Miss Wing's shop, which is a nod to their unrealized collaboration. Furthermore, the iconic line, "The only way to stop them is to feed them after midnight," was improvised by the child actor who played the role of Billy's younger brother, Corey. Director Joe Dante loved it so much that they decided to keep it in the final cut.
No.
Moving on to the special effects and filming techniques, I must commend the makeup artists for creating such realistic-looking monsters without CGI. How did they achieve this term? Did you get a chance to visit the sets during filming?
Well, Timothy, as much as I would love to share some behind-the-scenes secrets with you, my sources are a bit tight-lipped about certain details. However, I can tell you that the special effects team for Gremlins did an incredible job blending practical and optical effects to bring the Gremlins to life on screen. The creature shop responsible for creating Gizmo and his kin used puppetry, animatronics, and prosthetic makeup to achieve realistic-looking monsters that still maintain a sense of wonderment and fun. As for filming techniques, Director Joe Dante was known for his love for practical effects and utilized a combination of miniatures, scale models, and optical illusions to create the illusion of the Gremlins wreaking havoc on the town's Christmas display. The iconic scene where Gizmo accidentally gets wet in the kitchen sink is a prime example of this careful planning and execution. The team spent weeks perfecting the miniature sets, camera angles, and lighting to capture the chaos without resorting to CG. This dedication to practical effects adds a layer of authenticity that modern-day horror comedies often lack, in my opinion. So, Timothy, what do you think? Did the special effects and filming techniques in Gremlins hold up over time? Or have they aged poorly?
Well, Thomas, I must admit that while I am usually more drawn to period dramas and historical films, there are some standout performances in Gremlins that cannot be overlooked. Firstly, Zach Galligan's portrayal of Billy Peltzer is charming and relatable. His character's struggles with love loss and responsibility resonate with audiences of all generations. Phoebe Cates as his quirky and independent love interest, played by the talented Phoebe Cates, brought a much-needed touch of warmth to the otherwise chaotic storyline. Hoyt Axton's portrayal of Billy's father, Mr. Peltzer, was both comedic and heartwarming, adding depth to the film's exploration of family dynamics. And, of course, we can't forget about the furry star of the show, Gizmo. The late great actor Howie Mandel brought the adorable and resourceful Mogwai to life with his unique voice talent. Now let's discuss the antagonists in Gremlins. The role of Mrs. Deagle was masterfully portrayed by the late Polly Holliday, who infused the character with a mix of wealth power and unbridled hatred for all things Christmas-related. Her character's tragic demise at the hands of her own greed is both comedic and cautionary, serving as a reminder not to mess with nature's balance. As for the titular creatures themselves, the Gremlins, their performances are nothing short of iconic. Their mischievous behavior ranges from harmless pranks to outright destruction, adding an element of unpredictability that keeps viewers on edge throughout the film.
Well said, Tim. I agree with your assessment of the cast's performances, especially in regards to Gizmo and the Gremlins. However, let's not forget about the supporting characters such as Mr. Wynn, played by the late great Key Luke, who brought a sense of wisdom and history to the film with his knowledge of the mystical world of the Mogwai. And last, but certainly not least, there's the role of Phoebe Cates' character, Kate Beringer, which was brilliantly portrayed by the talented actress herself. Her character's backstory, which Timothy alluded to earlier, adds a layer of complexity and depth to her character's actions throughout the film. The scene where she reveals her traumatic past with her father and how it has impacted her relationship with Christmas is heart-wrenching yet ultimately redeeming. Now, moving on to cultural significance, Gremlins has become a classic holiday movie that continues to resonate with audiences, even after all these years. Its themes of greed, consumerism, and the importance of family values are still relevant today. The film also serves as a commentary on the danger of tampering with natural balances, something we as a society still need to be reminded of. Additionally, Gremlins has inspired numerous sequels, spin-offs, merchandise, and even a reboot, testifying to its enduring popularity and cultural impact. So, Timothy, in closing, what do you think is the most important lesson we can take away from Gremlins? Is it the importance of taking care of our pets, the danger of greed, or the value of family and community?
That's an excellent question, Tom and Ann. I think there are several lessons we can take away from Gremlins. One of the most important ones is definitely the danger of greed, as exemplified by Mrs. Deagle's selfishness and willingness to harm others for her own gain. This theme is prevalent throughout the film, with the gremlins themselves being a metaphor for the consequences of our desire for more material possessions. Additionally, we see the value of community and how the town comes together after the initial chaos caused by the gremlin. The final scene where everyone gathers at the Chinese restaurant to share their experiences and rebuild trust is a testament to this theme. Another important lesson from Gremlins is the importance of family values. As mentioned earlier, with Kate's backstory involving her father's untimely death on Christmas Eve, this tragic event shapes her character significantly throughout the film, ultimately leading to her rediscovering her love for the holiday season and its true meaning. Furthermore, we see how Billy's relationships with his parents and later Kate deepen over time as they navigate through these extraordinary circumstances together. Lastly, I believe Gremlins serves as a cautionary tale about respecting nature's balance. The Mogwai were warned not to be exposed to light or get wet. Yet their mistreatment by Billy and his friend Pete leads to disastrous consequences for the entire town. This theme is especially relevant today when we are facing issues like climate change and environmental degradation due to human activity. The film reminds us that we must be mindful of our actions and their potential impact on our planet and its inhabitants. In conclusion, Gremlins offers numerous valuable lessons about greed, family values, community, and respecting nature's balance. Its enduring popularity can be attributed not only to its entertaining blend of horror and comedy, but also its thought-provoking themes that continue to resonate with audiences of all ages, even decades after its release.
Well, said Timothy, and I'd like to add one more thing before we wrap up this fantastic episode of Tim and Tom's Film Nights. It's important to mention the film's brilliant use of practical effects, especially during the creature design process. The Gremlins themselves are true masterpieces of prosthetic makeup and puppetry, which adds a unique charm and authenticity to the film that would have been impossible to replicate with CG technology available at the time. This combination of practical effects and old-school practicality is what really sets Gremlins apart from many modern horror comedy hybrids that rely heavily on CG effects. The use of practical effects not only enhances the overall realism, but also serves as a nod to the craftsmanship and dedication of the behind-the-scenes artists who brought these iconic characters to life. And with that, we've reached the end of our journey through Gremlins. Thank you for joining us today, folks. Remember to comment, subscribe, and share this video with your friends and family, and don't forget to feed your pets on time. Until next time, film fanatics.